think it's probably worth recognizing just how far we've come as a country in the startup space. Even compared to just 10 years ago, it's been a radical transformation. We've got over 100 companies in Australia now valued at over $100 million. So tech startups, they're originated out of Australia. And we've got around 20 unicorn companies as well.
Welcome to the Make Tomorrow podcast. In this episode of Make Tomorrow, we are excited to welcome Ryan Black, the acting CEO of the Tech Council of Australia. Ryan has been a pivotal figure in shaping Australia's technology landscape through his work on investments, talent, regulation, and policy. With over 10 years of experience in the Australian public service, Ryan offers a wealth of knowledge on the future of technology in Australia. So welcome to the podcast, Ryan.
Thanks for having me, Tristan.
Public policy is your day job. Acting CEO is your kind of secondary role right now. Can you tell us a little bit about your career and your journey to becoming the acting CEO of the TCA?
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, I've been working in public policy and government roles for a significant period of time now. Some would say too long. For senior leadership roles across the public service with former Prime Minister working in his office, and also most recently with the Tech Council as well. I actually started out not in tech policy, but in environment policy. So that's where I started my public policy career, working on issues like biodiversity conservation, protection and resilience of the Great Barrier Reef, which might seem a little bit disconnected to, well, how do you start there and kind of end up working in tech and innovation? But actually a lot of those areas in environment are very much focused on science, innovation, and around sustainable industry development. So it wasn't that much of a jump to actually move into the industry, tech and innovation policy space, which is what I did and what I've been doing largely for the last 10 years, working in those areas in both the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, the Prime Minister's office, and now in the Tech Council as well. Before I joined the Tech Council, that was working on issues ranging from online safety to reform of the research and development tax incentives, manufacturing policy, the NBN, telecommunications. I joined the Tech Council about 2 years ago, and the Tech Council itself is actually only about 3 years old, so it's still a pretty young organisation. One of the things that kind of really attracted me and what impressed me about the Tech Council and why I wanted to, because it was kind of not just an industry advocacy body, but also kind of part think tank. A lot of the work that the Tech Council has done has been very kind of data and evidence driven, and it's also very pragmatic in how it works with governments on solutions. It's a collaborative body rather than a combative body.
First, I should say science to technology. I've always gone the opposite way. I call myself a bit of a citizen scientist, right? But you can see the similarities between them. The Great Barrier Reef, that would be a highly technical thing to confirm. So I was going to ask you a bit of an overview of the Tech Council of Australia, where they are and the mission at the moment. But I would just like to highlight before that, even give the overview, the timing of when the Tech Council came about. I mean, right at the beginning of COVID, wasn't it? And how important technology has become, digital tech in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great observation, actually. Yeah, it was kind of in the middle of the pandemic when it arose, but it was very much a kind of grassroots exercise, the emergence of the Tech Council. It was driven by the companies themselves wanting to have a united voice, speak to government on behalf of the tech sector and provide that industry perspective on some of the big policy issues that we know are facing the sector. There was the level of concern, I think, within the sector, but decisions were being taken without that industry voice being represented. And so that's primarily why we were brought together first and foremost, although we do a lot more than that as well. Our mission is built around 3 big goals for the sector by 2030. So we're looking to get to 1.2 million tech jobs by 2030, create a $250 billion tech sector in Australia by 2030, and make Australia the best place in the world to start and scale a tech company. So some pretty bold and big ambitions. Certainly on the first one, on the 1.2 million tech jobs, we're making some really great progress. We're about 935,000 as of the last time we looked at it early last year, and still growing very strongly. So we're confident that we can make that, and I think that's a real demonstrator because a lot of the conversation today in the public sphere has been around technology taking jobs, and what we know is that technology is actually a net generator of jobs, and there are a lot of jobs that we need to fill in tech. And actually, one of the biggest issues for jobs in technology is actually just finding people to fill them. been one of the big challenges. We've got shortages, not just in tech companies, but across the economy. To kind of reach those goals, there are three broad areas that we work across: growth, tax, investment related issues, talent and skills, and regulation. So they're the areas of common interest across the sector that we really try to focus on.
Tech skills is something that we've lent into in Australia. We know that tech creates new opportunities, and if tech evolves and becomes part of everyone's lives, there's more jobs and more things that we need to do. As a business, we look at reskilling people, and we've gone as far and beyond of, people out of different organizations that have had 20-year careers and reskilling them back in, even people like from the defence forces. What's some of the areas that you're looking at to kind of bring more tech skills into Australia?
Yeah, no, it needs to be across the board, and retraining, reskilling, what you were just talking about, Tristan, that is so important. And it's actually one of the most common pathways into tech now, and we think it is going to be the predominant pathway in tech over the next 6 to 7 years as we work towards that 1.2 million tech jobs. So we need about 600,000 people between now and 2030 to reach that, and about half of that we think is going to come from retraining and reskilling in the workforce. So that just kind of demonstrates how important it is. And I hear a lot of stories actually around people that have done this reskilling from completely different occupations. Great example of a chef during COVID, facing all of those lockdowns, hospitality really struggling, decided to become a software engineer, and has an excellent career and is making significantly more money as well, working in that field. I was with an Uber driver the other day in Sydney who was telling me he has moved out of sales and is currently studying cybersecurity. So these are becoming really common stories. And in fact, it's really important from a diversity perspective as well. There are more women that now enter the tech workforce over the age of 25 than under the age of 25, coming through mid-career rather than through university or out of school. We need to get all of those systems right. As entry-level training, we need to improve, need new improved pathways there. We need our retraining systems firing on all cylinders, and the skill migration piece is really important for technical and experienced roles in particular.
Funny one, to follow on from tech skills, let's talk about AI and the opposite end of the echelon. Generative AI adds about $115 billion to the national economy by 2030, right? What do you think some of the potential opportunities are for us locally?
I should start by saying that $115 billion figure is kind of the upper limit, and that depends on the rate of adoption. Getting to that is going to require effort. It's going to require government and industry collaboration. It's a big opportunity, but it's not just going to happen, not a magic pudding AI. We do need to make some deliberate policy decisions as a country around how do we enable that. Regulation is part of that, and it's going to be really important, and making sure we have the right regulatory settings and that they're proportionate and risk-based and targeted, and all those good regulatory design principles that we should be taking into account there. So the skills piece is really important. The investment piece, there are a lot of different pieces that we need to get right to get to that $115 billion. A lot of that is going to come from productivity growth. And the productivity enhancing applications of, so we think around 70% of that figure is essentially derived from productivity, automating and taking people's jobs, which is the common kind of conception of that. A lot of that is augmentation. It's about how technology can, yes, it might automate tasks within a job or within a role. And that allows workers to then redirect a lot of that effort into high-value tasks. If you think about healthcare workers, if you think about teachers, huge administrative workload, the ways in which AI and generative AI in particular can help reduce those workloads allows them to redeploy more of their time to those frontline services. So for healthcare workers, spending more time with their patients, for teachers, spending more time teaching kids, generative AI can actually be used as a personalized tutor for kids. And a lot of families can't necessarily afford that, for one. So it could be a great leveler in terms of education. Sometimes our education system is just a bit one size fits all, kind of spread across the whole economy, right? This is not just fitting into one particular application or use case. It's going to have productivity benefits in retail, in manufacturing, even in tech. We know that coders can code 2 times as fast using generative AI. So huge applications across the board and really exciting. And that's just in the economic applications. If you look beyond that, there's some really exciting opportunities in healthcare and in medical diagnosis, environmental applications as well, or in scam prevention and fraud prevention. And this is not all mythical stuff that might happen in the future. It's actually happening right here and right now.
And I can't agree more with you around the regulatory kind of certainty around that too, and actually having some governance that kind of comes into place. I think there's a lot to be done there. You had the Australian Tech Leaders Survey 2024 focused on AI, quantum and technology space. What are some of the highlights or insights that you found from that?
Yeah, so we surveyed a lot of the top tech leaders in the economy, asking people they saw the big trends for the coming year. AI, no surprises, came up on top. And I don't think that's going to surprise anyone. I think what was more of a surprise was some of the other areas, as you say, quantum space, that some of the leaders were saying, oh, these could actually be these dark horse trends that could overtake AI this year. And quantum in particular, I think, is really exciting for Australia. It's an area where we've got a lot of capability. We're actually at the global frontier of quantum technologies. When we talk about quantum technology, a lot of people think of quantum computing. That is one type of quantum technology, and we've got a huge amount of capability there. But there's also quantum sensing, there's quantum communications, and Australia has world-leading companies across the board. So, and the opportunities there, certainly in the economic side, with CSIRO and others have done forecasts around this, thousands of jobs, billions of dollars for the economy. Also in the defense and security space, there's a lot of interesting applications as well. So in an area like sensing, for example, the development of quantum sensing technologies is enabling more efficient detection of mineral deposits for mining companies. So it's supporting growth of that area of the economy. But equally, we're also seeing the application of quantum sensing being applied in defense radars, which enables Australia and its allies to see much further in detecting potential threats to our respective countries. So we've got around 3% of the world's startups in quantum here in Australia, punching above our weight. But I think funding is going to be really important for that sector. And it is actually quite urgent as well. We're seeing a lot of governments across the globe invest very heavily into their local quantum sectors. Australia needs to keep with that. Otherwise, what of those companies will either disappear overseas or they'll go under. So if we want to keep that advantage, then there is an urgent need to move.
3% of startups in quantum in Australia. We're not 3% of the world population. So it's a fair effort. We want to become a leading place for tech startups, right, in Australia. And I found we kind of peak and flow in different areas. And there's definitely opportunity. There's smarts here. There's great multicultural country, which means we've got a wealth of experiences across the board. How do we do that? Like, is it government policy? Is it funding from grants? Is it what are some of the secret source items or things that will stimulate that to grow?
It's a combination of things. I don't think there's a silver bullet. Number one, I think it's probably worth recognizing just how far we've come as a country in the startup space. Even compared to just 10 years ago, it's been a radical transformation. We've now got, and it's just look at how these startups have become more and more successful in Australia now as well. We've got over 100 companies in Australia now valued at over $100 million. So tech startups. They're originated out of Australia, and we've got around 20 unicorn companies as well. If you went back 10 years ago, or 15 years ago even, that would really non-existent. There wasn't a lot of activity kind of happening here at this point. And if you look at those 100 companies that I was talking about, almost 70% of those actually founded after 2010. So huge amount of activity that's happened over this last 10 to 15 years. A lot of that has been driven by improvements in the funding environment. I think that has been particularly critical. We know that we've got a lot of skills and talent here. We've got a highly educated population, great place to live and work. But what we were really missing in that period was venture capital environment in Australia was, I wouldn't say non-existent, but it was certainly nowhere near what it looked like now. There were a lot of important policy decisions to get us to where we are now, though. So there were changes, certainly at the federal government level, to the tax arrangements for things like early stage venture capital limited partnerships, which have encouraged a flow of investment into early stage venture capital. We've seen changes to angel investing arrangements and some of the incentives that are put in place for those as well. So the combination of a whole range of things, I think, has helped grow that venture capital environment, which in turn has really been driving that growth that we've seen in the startup sector over the past 10 to 15 years. So, and when I speak to a lot of the venture capital partners around Australia in particular, they're very bullish on Australia. I did have one of the partners from Square Peg say to me in recent times that he kind of sees Australia where Israel was kind of 10 or so years ago. And, it sees just a lot of opportunity that's going to happen here over the next period of time. So we've got a lot right. I think there are a couple of things we need to do. One, just not stuff it up. I think, governments can sometimes play around with these policy settings and cause issues rather than fix problems. So just got to be careful not to stuff it up. And then there are some important things that we need to get right. One of the things that the startup sector is really focused on at the moment in the government space is how we define what a sophisticated or wholesale investor is for the purposes of investing in a venture capital fund or as an angel investor directly into a tech company as well. So those, it's a very technical issue. It's a definitional issue. But other countries like the UK and the US do it a lot better than Australia. And we just got to be careful about locking out a whole heap of investors out of that market, because that's the type of thing that we could really stuff up. So, the couple of things that we really need to focus on.
So we are seeing, I'm seeing it personally, just a lot more VC and investment coming in the local market, particularly from overseas investors. And there are other factors at play in it. The US dollar to the Australian dollar probably helps for some internationals that are coming in. So some market environmental things. But what I see mostly is the smarts that comes out of Australia. And I can see where Square Peg, who are kind of one of the foundational VCs in the tech space in Australia, coming out and saying a lot of liking to what the Israel model had 10 years ago. That's really interesting. So let's move on to an area that we had a previous session around, cybersecurity. So I was going to jump straight from quantum into cyber, but I didn't want to scare people too much. So we get the good side of technology. Let's look at the challenges that we're having. So cyber, absolutely on the rise. We've seen some major breaches in Australia over the last year, one not too long ago as well. Quantum computing and other things are just making it easier. Artificial intelligence and deep fakes and all that sort of stuff. How do you see the Tech Council of Australia getting involved and helping with that? I mean, it's there are obviously other bodies involved as well, but what do we need to do and do better?
Yeah, look, we've been working really closely with the government on this, especially since the Medibank and Optus incidents back in 2022. And so there's a lot of work that's kind of happening on the policy front. So I think that's really important. One of the things that I think we need to see a lot more of is better collaboration between government and businesses. This is something that need a whole of economy and whole of society approach. It's not something that just can be dealt with by government alone, and it's certainly not something that businesses can deal with alone without that kind of collaboration with government as well, particularly around things like threat sharing, threat blocking. But those are areas that we need a greater level of collaboration. But one of the challenges that we've had is that some of that collaboration has actually been going backwards in recent years. And that's something I think been recognised by some of the security agencies within government, and there are steps that have been taken to try to address that. One of the things that is being pursued as part of the current reform process that the government's doing around the cybersecurity strategy is a limited use obligation, which is about how cyber agencies within government actually use information that's handed on by businesses to them when there is a cyber attack or an attempted cyber attack. And so I think that is really important, because what we're seeing is that a lot of businesses are getting worried about sharing that information with government because of the way in which it might be used by government agencies in terms of prosecutions or making them liable for incidents. And so getting caught up in this kind of tangled legal web instead of focusing on actually just dealing with the problems. And so the government's looking at what are some of the measures that we can put in place to create a better environment for collaboration, more open environment for collaboration. So that's really important. I think we can lose sight, though, of some of the other levers that we need to pull. So I think technology is really important, and there are a whole range of technologies that will come to bear here. You were talking about AI and quantum and some of the challenges that they present, Tristan, and I think that's right. But there are also opportunities with those technologies as well. And I think that if we are going to, the country be effective in addressing some of the increased challenges that we're seeing from AI-enhanced attacks or more sophisticated scams or phishing attacks, for example, driven by AI, or the threats that quantum computing presents in terms of decryption and things like that. then we're going to need to be better at using those technologies defensively and offensively as well. So we can't be left behind on that. And if we don't get ahead of that curve, but the bad actors do, then that's just going to put us at a massive competitive disadvantage when it comes to cybersecurity. So we actually need to use the technology to our advantage. Digital ID and credentials is going to be a really important part of that as well. And we might talk about that a little bit more, but there are other things as well. We need to kind of get our skills system right. There are shortages in these cybersecurity roles. We need to think about how are we getting the people that we need to fill those roles, to bring those skill sets to bear, not just in tech companies, but in every company. And we have a look at last time we were together, Tristan, we were at an event down in Melbourne. And the CTO there was talking about the fact that they've got 700 people working in their cybersecurity division. It's really significant, and we're seeing those massive investments in cyber across the economy. And it's really necessary, but as it is necessary, and as more and more people are seeking out those skills, we do have shortages, and we do need to fill them. So that's not just migration. We need to think about those domestic training systems as well. And one of the things that we've been pushing for there is a digital apprenticeship model, so just entry level, but also retraining. So how do we support people that engage in these earn while you learn models, essentially, in the digital space, and create different and sometimes more attractive pathways for people into these sorts of jobs.
Let's go on to the digital ID side of it, because I think that's a really important factor that going to help prevent these data breaches and enhance some of the privacy as well. Like a lot of countries overseas are already at that level, and we're a little bit lagging on that.
A lot of Australians actually do have digital IDs now. A lot of them will be engaging with the MyGov ID system, which is your kind of primary entry point at this time into accessing government services using digital ID. What we've just seen recently, actually, the Parliament just passed new legislation to support the expansion of digital identity in Australia, and I think that that's going to be really important. There's a couple of really important things that legislation does. Number one, it creates an accreditation framework for private sector digital ID providers to give confidence around the types of standards and requirements that they're putting in place. So that's about giving confidence to the market around digital ID providers, because I know that there are questions from some people in the community about safety and privacy and those sorts of things. When in fact, people in the technology industry, we know that digital ID is actually security and privacy enhancing. That's why we want it. That's why we want to roll it out, because it's important for preventing fraud. It's important for preventing, important also for ensuring that companies don't hold data that they don't need to, supporting data minimization, which is also important for cybersecurity, and preventing some of these large-scale data breaches that we're seeing. So that's really critical. One of the other things that the legislation is doing is enabling private sector digital ID providers and public sector digital ID providers start supplying into those other parts of the market. So essentially, you could get a digital ID that works across all your government services, but might work with your banking and other services in the private sector as well. So this starts making it more efficient and more attractive for people in Australia to have a single digital ID that they can use again and again across multiple different services. So I think that there are some exciting times ahead on digital ID. You're right, we're not as far ahead as some other countries on this, but I think with this new legislation being put in place, we've got a lot of opportunity over the next couple of years.
Yeah, fantastic. We've just come off a federal budget. What are some of the initiatives that have come out of that might boost investment or improve some of the workforce pipeline that we've talked about before?
Yeah, look, the federal budget was interesting. I think that if you work in clean energy tech, then it was a fabulous budget for you. We saw the Made in Australia investment that were made. It was about $22 billion, most of which is going into clean energy tech, production incentives, things like hydrogen, critical minerals, and then a whole range of different investments in batteries and solar and those sorts of things. So if you're in that space, then you're probably pretty happy with the budget. For the rest of the tech sector, I'd say that the budget was fairly modest, but it wasn't bad in that there were no kind of big cuts or anything, which is always a tick of approval. But there are a couple of good investments there as well. Talking about migration before, there was an investment in a new national innovation visa, which will essentially be a replacement for the global talent program. And I think wrap in elements of the business investment and innovation visa programs as well. So this is in a permanent part of the migration program. So that complements some of the broader reforms that the government's doing in the migration space. Overall, we're really supportive of what we're seeing here in migration reform. We think this is going to be a game changer for the tech sector in particular. And aside to the announcement in the budget, what's happening in the temporary skill migration space, what the government's doing is putting in place what they're calling a specialist skills stream for temporary skill migration. So if you're bringing in a worker into Australia earning over $135,000 a year, then you don't have to fit them into an occupation list. So, that the ABS hosts, and you have to tick a box about what type of worker they are, what type of occupation that they fall into. We know that that's been a real problem for the tech sector because a lot of the jobs that are in tech, commonly in tech here and now, are not classified by the ABS because that system's really out of date. So I think that's really important. You get 7-day, on average, 7-day visa processing for people coming in through that stream. That is game changing. That is world class. That is a world class standard that we're putting in place there at the moment. Or if we look back just a couple of years ago, what you were facing was 2 to 3 months to bring someone into the country via the temporary skill migrant program. So that is really significant. And there are some other changes as well, like pathways to permanent residency and reduced requirements around labour market testing. So all of those things mean that our visa system and our is going to be much more responsive, much less costly, and it's going to be much easier for tech companies to attract global talent into the country. Some additional funding there for safe and responsible AI. So a lot of work happening behind the scenes on that at the moment, and there's a lot more detail to be unveiled on that. We've also saw an investment in diversity in the STEM education and STEM workforce. So this is not just about gender diversity, it's about all types of diversity, but we know gender diversity in particular has been a real challenge for the tech sector and the tech workforce. Also a real opportunity. So if we can boost gender diversity in the workforce, that's going to help address some of those workforce shortages that we've been talking about. But it's also really critical from a broader economic and social equality perspective as well, because we know that these are some of the fastest growing, and best paid jobs in the economy.
I'm glad you actually mentioned that, because I think diversity, accessibility, all those sorts of areas that aren't tapped into well enough. We've done some work with Dylan Alcott and his dad, Martin, around getting skills into different people, just different areas of what's life, because that's one way you feed, obviously, the tech skill shortage. Fantastic about migration policy as well, because that's, being a services business myself in tech, like to get people in time has just taken, you talk about STEM, but also down to kind of schools and universities. Now, I sit on the advisory board of Swinburne University, and I'm very encouraged by what I see in the market around how we're starting to kind of get really down to the grass. Now it is, and it's becoming a bit more mainstream. Very investment in that, like into the schooling system, into the education system a bit more to try and, grow our own home talent, which we won't do as quickly as we will for other angles because we're a small population. But yeah, what do you think there?
Yeah, look, a couple of things that we definitely need to do there. I mean, one of the big challenges that we have is that we're just not seeing enough Australians actually go into the higher education system when it comes to tech and ICT related roles. So there is a lot of growth in those courses at university in particular, not so much in vet. In university, there has been a lot of growth, but a lot of that growth has been via international students. And Australian domestic students kind of going into these courses and graduating, that's kind of stayed relatively stagnant over a 20-year period, which is pretty remarkable given just how much we've seen the sector grow at that time. We're just not seeing enough Australian domestic students actually take those opportunities up. One of the issues there, I think, is at the school level is actually how do we raise awareness and help students understand what these jobs look like and what they offer and the diversity of jobs that are available. I think that there's still some misconceptions around what a tech job is. Because the tech job is not just one job. There are so many different types of tech jobs, and there are so many types of companies that you can work in. So one of the things that we've been investing in directly as an industry, and we've got some great partners on board with this, with Microsoft and NBN and Commonwealth Bank, we're investing in a virtual work experience program for not just secondary school students, but also post-school leavers and other young Australians, regardless of where they live, regardless of their background, regardless of their abilities, gives them the opportunity to try out and go hands-on with what a tech job actually looks like, We've got a variety of modules on this: software engineers, data scientists, cybersecurity specialists, network engineers. So there are quite a few different jobs that we've built into this virtual work experience program. But the idea is to basically get young Australians more interested and give them the opportunity just to kind of experience what these jobs are and what they offer, and what the pathways are to get into them, so that we can get a bigger pipeline of students coming out of the school system and into university and vet.
One last question, and don't take this literally because someone has followed up afterwards. So if I give you a blank check to invest in one technology overnight, what will that be? Not literally, I don't have the blank check.
Quantum computing is still the next big thing, and we haven't quite cracked it yet. But we're world leading in that here in Australia. And so if I was going to invest here in Australia and say, let's put some money in quantum, we know it's going to be transformational. We know it's one of those horizontal technologies that kind of feeds into everything, kind of like AI. We know that there are a lot of different types of quantum computing technologies that are being developed. So it's not clear exactly at this point which one's going to emerge as the leader. If we've got some amazing talent, some amazing companies here in quantum. So
that's been fantastic. We may have to have you back.
Thanks, Tristan. Appreciate you having me.
If you found today's episode interesting and want to hear more about our Make Tomorrows, please subscribe to our channel.